And I believe one of the antihistamines can actually lower a man's testosterone. Actually, women have testosterone too, so one of them in particular, people can look it up, can lower your testosterone. So here you are taking X drug medication for, tree pollen, and you can't understand why your training and your sex drive is down months later. So people.
But surprise, surprise, you take drugs, there's going to be side effects, right? No, this is no joke. You can literally get a brain-eating amoeba from the water. I guess for whatever reason, if you drink that water, it's not a big deal, but as soon as you put that neti pot into your face and you get it all up in your sinuses, those amoebas can work their way into your brain and you're done. Brain-eating amoebas, which, heads up, you don't want. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, Nick. How are you, man?
Good, good. Thankfully not suffering from seasonal allergies currently, but I know a lot of people who are, and I wanted to take a look at seasonal allergies as a full episode and see, kind of what was going on there. It is something that I have had problems with in the past, and for whatever reason, right now in my life, it's not affecting me, but it can be totally debilitating. And for me, in my early 20s, it actually was. I grew up without having any allergies, nothing, never a problem. I could have, stood in the, laid in the grass, hung out outside, never had a seasonal allergy or to dust or to pollen or to grass or to anything like that. And then all of a sudden in my 20s, bam, I got hit really hard out of nowhere. I had no idea what was going on. And my nose would just turn on like a faucet. And I couldn't leave the house. There were times where I literally could not leave the house without a plug in my nose because it would just be leaking out everywhere.
Jeez.
Have you ever had any experience with this?
So I have had allergies, and we should talk too, Nick. We should talk about histamines in foods, because this is a big thing. And it seems to get worse at certain times, but there's a lot of foods that people can mistaken for seasonal allergies, and they can kind of present themselves the same way. But yeah, I have had allergies, but I've seen it a lot training as many people as I've trained over the 30 years. People come in wrecked, especially at this time of the year. And in the winter, sometimes there's allergy seasons, here in New York. You wouldn't think that when it's cold out, but people come in. But this time of the year is tough for a good amount of my clients. I think there's things we do nutritionally to try to, mitigate that a little bit.
So do you know, what is happening when people are having an allergic response to an allergen that's in their environment?
Yeah, I mean, their body is pretty much, from what I know, and I've actually trained several allergists in my time. So basically, your body is recognizing it as a foreign invader, and it's your immune system over responding and having a histamine response.
It's really a false response because it's not really attacking you, right? I mean, these things are not a danger to you, but it believes it to be a danger. And then the response is the problem, you're getting the symptoms.
Right. Well, if you're constantly under that load, or, you're dealing with that allergen, whether it's outside or it's a food, your body will a lot of times overproduce, like you had said, your body will produce mucus.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that on a regular basis, a lot of times that can present itself or turn into a sinus infection or an ear infection. And this can be debilitating for people, and that gives you a downstream effect or problems, right? Because if you're chronically stuffed and you're congested all the time and you don't know what it is, sometimes you'll go to a doctor and they'll prescribe you an antibiotic. So now you're on an antibiotic, and that can kill the flora in your intestines. So it turns into other things.
It cascades and becomes a big problem.
Yes.
And these are histamines, which dilate your blood vessels, and it causes problems. And that's what kind of triggers that immune response with the mucus, I think.
Yeah. So it's a tough thing. And, if people are dealing with it from the outside and then they're eating foods that we'll get into, it can cause somebody to really feel like complete shit.
Now, I know some people are born with it, some people develop it. For me, and this is kind of an interesting story, New York City, and I don't know exactly what year it was, but somewhere late 90s, early 2000s, they had a really big push to plant a lot of trees. And when you plant a lot of female trees, they produce fruits and seeds and all these different things. It drops all over the sidewalk and becomes a problem. So to avoid that, they planted predominantly male trees. And with no female trees to basically suck it up and create, all the fruits and the seeds and all these different things, it just blanketed New York City with an abundance of pollen, and it honestly destroyed me. It's when I moved to the city that my allergies started, and I wonder if it was triggered by a response to that overproduction of pollen. And I will be honest, when I go near, not as much now, but back then in my 20s, when I would go near Central Park, I mean, I was basically incapacitated if it was the spring or the fall, in a way that made it, again, like I said, hard to leave the house. It's crazy. And I know it's not just in New York City. A lot of different cities throughout the East Coast of this country kind of had this same idea around the same time, didn't realize what the effect was going to be. And it's not been good, not been good for me. And I'm sure other people are also suffering from similar symptoms.
So maybe this is where the term toxic masculinity.
That was toxic masculinity. It's true.
Even the trees are toxic.
I know, it's seriously, but that's the real toxic masculinity, because those things are just blanketing us with pollen. The pollen can also create inflammation too. And a lot of times I think it wasn't even just the mucus response that was affecting me, but it was also the inflammation, because you could just feel your sinus close up. It's not just that it's clogged. Sometimes there wasn't anything coming out, but it just felt packed in there.
Like cement.
Correct.
Yeah, and if you're exercising, like most of our viewers are probably doing, as they listen to this podcast,
As they should, of course, yeah.
And if they're feeling a little labored in their breathing, it could be a stuffed sinus cavity, But yeah, it can make it actually, with all seriousness, when somebody is suffering from season allergies, or it could be an allergen that they're eating every morning for breakfast or something like that. A lot of times that can really impact their quality of their training, especially if they're doing aerobics or any sort of conditioning work.
And in the future, I do want to do an episode on functional medicine, which is a real deep dive for people into the specifics of foods that they could be allergic to.
Oh, yeah.
I've had some family members have real success doing, detailed blood work through a functional medicine doctor, and finding out that they had been eating foods that they were totally allergic to.
It's funny. I wanted to do that. I mean, I'm pretty in tune from doing this for so long, like what does what, but I'm sure
we should do it. We should do it. Have you get the panel, have a doctor in, and talk about it if you're open to talking about your stuff on camera. That would be great.
Yeah, because the screwed up thing with food is there could be a 72-hour delay in the response to a food. So if somebody,
and it can be simple things like chicken.
Yes.
Things like that you're like, oh, that's a staple. I eat that 4 times a week.
You can be allergic to white rice, believe it or not.
That's crazy.
That's as benign as it comes, because sometimes when I've worked with people and we're trying to figure out what's ailing them, it's kind of like, eat this food and then we have to wait 3 days and then until we incorporate another food or take that out, because there can be, sometimes it's an hour later. Literally, somebody can start to feel they're getting stuffed, or a little itch or whatever it is. But the fatigue and the malaise that comes with some of these allergens could have a delayed response, and you're kind of chasing your tail sometimes.
Now, for athletes and people who are working out, these immune responses can be really bad. It affects your recovery. It affects your ability to absorb the oxygen that you're breathing in. So you have to work harder, breathe heavier. You're not recovering. This can be really impactful for people who, not just professional athletes, but just people who are trying to stay in shape, and you just feel way more run down from doing your normal day-to-day routines. And that can be tough for people, and sometimes can be a reason why people drop off for a week or two. And then we all know, if you drop off for a week or two, getting back on that horse is difficult.
Yeah.
So people have to really be vigilant and be aware that, they're just going through a little bit of a allergy cycle, and they can, get right back out there.
Right. Yeah, it can impact their sleep for sure.
Obviously, different things that people are allergic to, just so we're saying it. There's a lot of tree pollens out there. I talked about that before. There can be grass pollens out there. Dust can be a big problem for people, and that can come at different times of the year. Obviously, we said there are foods, but there are a lot of different things that people can be allergic to that are seasonal, that can be passing through their area. There's sometimes, you can see even on the news, they'll say like it's a high allergy alert day or things like that. So
I feel like every year they say it's going to be the worst year. Right?
Yeah.
It's going to be the worst.
Well, it's always, that's good for the news, right? When something terrible is happening, that gets viewers. But, but insects, mold, dust, all these different things can be problematic for people, and then again, can come in cycles.
Yeah.
Just a couple stats that I wanted to throw out there too, and just so people know how big of a problem this is. 30% of adult Americans are dealing with seasonal allergies, and actually 40% of children. So this affects children more so than adults. And it can be harder for children to deal with this because they don't want to take the medicines and they don't feel good when they do. And, they're maybe thinking they're sick because with kids, if you have kids or you know any kids, you know that they go to school, they pick
Yeah,
up
man.
germs all the time, they come home, they get sick. So is it something that they got at school? Is this a seasonal allergy? That can be, really hard to pinpoint with children, but it's definitely affecting them. And again, you want to be wary of putting kids on any kind of long-term medications like the Claritins and the Benadryls and all these different things. They have side effects.
I believe one of them, I don't want to say the name, so we don't, but maybe people want to look into it, Nick. I believe one of the antihistamines can actually lower a man's testosterone.
That's not good.
Actually, women have testosterone too, so one of them in particular, people can look it up, can lower your testosterone.
Okay.
So, here you are taking X drug medication for, tree pollen, and you can't understand why your training and your sex drive is down months later. So people,
But
really
surprise,
like to-
surprise, you take drugs, there's going to be side effects, right?
Right.
And that's why I think people, no matter what you're taking a drug for, of course, don't go against your doctor. You have to survive. There are
Right.
times when you got to deal with the side effects because you're going to die. But if it's just for a runny nose, you really have to think about what you're going to do. And we're going to talk about some natural remedies later in the episode.
Right, but you think about, when you think about drugs, you think about them in different classes, and you think about like an antihistamine. Most people, including myself, until I found out about this, would never think, oh, this antihistamine is going to lower my testosterone.
No, you don't
levels.
think about that at
So
all.
most of our viewers are going to be concerned with their hormonal health, and they wouldn't
And
even think about something like that.
When you're not feeling good, you're not going to open up that allergy medication and read the fine print that's like, an ancient sea scrolls length long, and you're like trying to find out what the whole deal is in there. You're not going to do it. You're just going to take that thing so you feel better.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, and this is not a political statement or a scientific statement, but the way the climate has shifted in the last number of years since we've been alive, it's actually extended the allergy season by 20 or 30 days. So whereas it used to be a little shorter in the 80s, doctors are finding now that allergy seasons can be extended by up to 20 days each time around. So that's unfortunate. And on top of that, they have a measurable difference in productivity during allergy season. People are just not working as hard. And I'll be honest, when I would go into work and I was destroyed, I would do the bare minimum and then just go rest, because you're not getting good sleep. You don't feel well. You don't want to talk to anybody. You don't even want to be outside, but it would last for weeks. I couldn't just not go to work for weeks. There might be a really bad day here and there where I'd have to call it in, but mostly you just deal with it.
Yeah.
And dealing with it at work when you're feeling that bad, you're not giving 100%.
No.
And you shouldn't be expected to. You can't.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that, people should be chastised for, doing that or being less productive, but it is what it is. That's just the fact of the matter. People are going to do less work and be less productive during those peaks of the allergy season.
Absolutely.
So a couple things, and again, I said we'll talk about some natural remedies later, but, I wanted to bust a couple myths. And one of them is that local honey is going to just turn your whole world around with these allergies.
Yeah,
And
honey.
I try.
It's big right now.
And I love, honey's great
Right now.
Honey is great, right? Honey never goes bad. Honey is like antimicrobial. Honey's got all these properties that are great. It's natural. It's not like
Right.
a refined sugar. But the idea, I think, that honey is going to cure your allergies, for me personally, and from what I've read, it's not a thing.
Right.
Because a lot of the allergies are from wind-blown pollens, and they don't make it into the honeys. The bees are taking their pollen from the different flowers and other plants that are around that aren't the reason why you're having those symptoms for the most part. So
Right.
could be that people are just getting a little bit of a placebo effect. They want to feel better, and hey, good for you. If taking a little bit of honey as your medicine works, that's the best medicine there is, right? I just wish it worked, and I don't think it does.
I feel like honey is the new olive oil. We know how Mike Lynch feels about olive oil and oils in themselves. You probably shouldn't eat a lot of oil because it's just such a concentrated form of calories, and it's not natural, but that's for fats. video. I think we touched on the fats video. We talked about the oils.
Yeah, I wouldn't be having a cup of honey every day. I mean, you use a little bit here and there.
I mean, it's got a lot of good stuff to it, but it's kind of thing like a little bit goes a long way. It's still straight up sugar. So, and it does have a lower glycemic index and stuff like that, but it takes up no room. Just, I know this is not what we're talking about. This is not a weight loss video, but you brought up honey. So it's a very concentrated form of calories, and people have to be very mindful if they're going to use honey, just to use, because we want to talk about the allergies, but we want everybody to be lean and mean and energetic. So if you're going to use honey, just use it in small amounts. Because right now, honey's the new kid on the block.
I like honey. You're not taking my honey away from me, but I don't use a lot of honey, so I know. But it's certainly not helping my allergies. Now, some people think that the air inside your home is going to be better, so they don't go outside when it's allergy season. But actually, the air inside your home can be more contaminated with pollen.
Is that right?
And we've talked about this before. If you're not using the right air filters and different things like that, so you're not going to be safe by just staying inside if you're not, filtering out that air and, taking care of yourself in that way. So,
Okay.
now, one good thing for our viewers who are already working out is that exercise can actually lower or lessen the symptoms that people are experiencing from their seasonal allergies. So that is a good thing. Just a little bit of exercise can bring that allergic reaction down and bring that inflammation down. So that's another reason to exercise. If you haven't started and you're experiencing seasonal allergies, get on the treadmill, get on the elliptical, get those weights in your hand, right, Mike?
Absolutely, because especially for guys are gross, right? So if they have like shit coming out of their nose and they're out of shape, this is a double whammy, Nick. So at least if they have some allergies going on and they're lean and mean, they'll be like, all right, he looks gross with the stuff coming out of his nose, but he's in good shape.
Now, the thing they have to remember, though, is, if you're working out outside, try to do that at the lowest pollen count time of the day. I don't know when that would be. You'd have to do like some kind of pollen tracker. But if you go out when the trees are just, blanketing it all over everything, you're going to get screwed. So don't go out for a run when the pollen's raining down on you.
Right. Absolutely.
And you see it sometimes in the city. You literally see sometimes there'll be yellow dust all over the cars.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy.
Yes. It looks like it rained pollen. Yeah.
Yes.
I guess I would assume when it's really super windy, too. That's probably not the best time to go out.
There are a lot of different drugs out there that people can try to help alleviate these symptoms, non-natural ways, antihistamines that people can take, Benadryls and things like that. And again, I'm not promoting any of this stuff. I'm just kind of putting it out there for it is what it is. But they all have some side effects. Have you had any experience with any antihistamine drugs or anything?
Yeah, I actually, I don't sleep well, Nick. So I do take Benadryl sometimes as like a sleep aid. So that time, with the Benadryl, I have to take it early though.
Well, because it causes sleepiness. That's one of the side effects.
Yeah, there's a hangover. When I drink booze, I don't get hungover, and a lot of people give up booze because they get the hangover. I actually get a hangover from Benadryl. So the next morning I can feel a little kind of groggy for a few hours. So if I'm ever going to use Benadryl as a sleep aid, because a lot of doctors will tell you before you go to sleep medication to try a Benadryl. Let's say I would go to bed at 9 o'clock. I like front load it. I'll take it at like 6 o'clock at night, right after dinner, because I don't care if I'm feeling a little groggy while I'm watching TV.
And that can also impact athletic performance as well.
Oh, yeah.
Big time, right?
Yep.
I think it causes dry mouth. It causes dizziness in some people.
Sure.
It can even impact your heart health if you're overusing the antihistamine. That is something that
I did not know.
Yeah.
And the other stuff, I've tried the Zyrtex and the Claritins and stuff like that. I really personally didn't feel the times that I felt like I was having an allergic response to something outside. I didn't really feel much of a benefit personally.
Yeah, those were like the second generation antihistamines. They came out a little later. I experienced some symptom relief with those drugs early on, and then that wore off, and I don't know if I had just used it too much or my body got used to it.
Okay.
Or if my allergy response was changing. But they do have measurable side effects, and you are going to feel different. So if you're out there and you're thinking about trying one of those drugs, try it on a day off. try it on a day when you don't have to do anything, just in case you feel like you want to jump out of your skin, you feel a little crazy, right? And that's what I felt. I would feel like legitimately like Looney Tunes when I would take that stuff.
Yeah.
It was really difficult for me. So I did not enjoy it. I would only do it on the days where my allergies were really bad.
Okay.
There's also the nasal sprays. That's actually for me, what ended up working the last few years, where they're not as bad, but I'll take one of the nasal sprays. I believe they're steroids. So you do have to be careful. And that can cause a bad taste in your mouth, dizziness. Again, usually for me, the first day or two I'm on it makes me feel a little crazy. And then that kind of wears off. And thankfully, in the last few years, my allergies have waned a little bit. And so I don't have to take these medications for very long. Maybe it's a couple days, a week at most, and then I can kind of deal with the mild symptoms after that. So that can be difficult, but it's not pleasant. I mean, it's a gross taste. Once you get that nasal drip of whatever weird chemical you're putting in your body, it's not my favorite part of the day.
No, yeah. They do help though. They do. If you're like what you talked about earlier, where you're all locked up, and especially if you're having a food allergy and you take that food allergy out and then you take those inhalers, they do definitely open up the sinuses and let things drain the way they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is when you have this overproduction of mucus, it's happening day in and day out, and it just kind of turns into like cement, and then it just can't, like you said before, nothing's coming out.
Nothing's coming out, stuck in there.
And the benefit of those sprays are they do shrink everything and allow it to start to drain, and you can actually breathe again. So.
Yeah. Now, some of these drugs they cause dry mouth. They can be almost a diuretic. So you really have to be mindful of hydration during these times. And when you're, expelling a lot of mucus, that's a lot of your, the hydration that's in your body too. You're just getting rid of all these fluids and it's coming out in different ways. But you got to make sure that you're drinking sometimes more water than you usually are because you're getting so many of those liquids out of your body.
Sure.
Now, drugs are not the only way that people can try to attack these symptoms that they're dealing with. We talked about honey. Obviously, that's not going to be great, but a neti pot can really be helpful for some people. You don't want to use tap water when you're using a neti pot, right? You want to use, I think is it distilled water?
Or you could boil it.
You can boil water.
Yeah.
You can get like a brain amoeba if you're doing this. And Mitchell, if you're listening to this, you don't want that brain amoeba, but you don't want that.
I did not know, I have a story with a neti pot, and I didn't know about the water thing. So I'll tell you quick, many, many years ago, before I even got into nutrition and training, I used to get these recurring sinus infections, and they would put me on antibiotic. It would get better, and then I would get another one. And then I got one, Nick, that was lasted literally, they put me on 3 months of antibiotic, like a low-grade antibiotic. It just was not getting better.
That's not good.
Yeah. So I was at my wit's end, and there was this natural supplement store back in the 90s. And I walked into this guy. This guy was like a weirdo or whatever. And there was this box up on the top of the shelf. He's like, yo, you need a neti pot. And I was like, what the fuck is that? So anybody out watching this that doesn't know what a neti pot, it's like this genie bottle, right?
Yeah.
It's like a little genie bottle.
Looks like almost like what you'd use to water plants.
Yeah, you put water in it. It's pretty gross. And you put a saline or salt, and you put it in your nose, and it runs through your nose and comes out the other nose, and it drains out your sinuses. So at the same time, Nick.
Yeah, so it's cleaning out some of the pollens and the contaminants that are in there. It also moistens the membrane, which can be good if you're all dried out.
Right. And you really have to kind of learn how to use this thing, because when I first did
it's a weird feeling.
I put it out and went down my throat, and I was like, what the hell? But at the time, the doctor had put me on an antibiotic, and I actually, the first generation that I ever heard, it was called the Rhinocort. Okay. So I was on an antibiotic, this Rhinocort, and I started doing the neti pot. Well, I didn't know that I was supposed to boil the water, use this, distilled water, and I was using regular table salt. Thank God I lucked out and I didn't have a problem. But I will say, not to get gross, but these things do work for me. Those 3 1-2 punch, and then I ended up taking dairy out of my diet that really fixed me. I will tell you that after like 3 days of doing that, between the antibiotic, which I had taken many times before and it helped a little bit, I was blowing my nose and it literally felt like my brains were coming out. I must have had so much stuff
Just
up
impacted in there.
oh my God. It felt like it felt so good. It felt like better than sex. When I was blowing my nose, I was like, oh my God, I was landscaping at the time. I had a landscape business.
Well, think about all the pollen that you were probably getting. If you're landscaping, you're just mowing grass and it's coming up in your face and there's trees just like.
But I was banging down dairy like multiple times a day. And I took dairy out of my diet at the time because this was right before I became a personal trainer. And I read about dairy and I said, let me take it out of my diet. And I never went back because I didn't realize, Nick, and people need to pay attention to this. I didn't know how stuffed I was to 365. I mean, I had the full-blown sinus infection, but I think I was always walking around with a low level of inflammation in my sinuses because once I did the neti pot, took the antibiotic and the Flonase, I wasn't Flonase, it was Rhinocort, and took dairy out. Oh my God, like after I got better, I was done with the antibiotics and everything, I was like, I felt like I always told everybody, I felt like I had my nose roto-rooted.
Yeah.
And I never went back to dairy. I've tried to put it in a couple times and boom, 2 days later, this whole nostril just gets clogged.
Yeah.
And I never realized how like breathing normal feels until and I think that the neti pot was like one of the things that was very important and flushing that out. Now, fast forward the tape 30 years later, I thought I was getting a sinus infection at one point, so I broke out the neti pot. And my wife knew what it was. And I was filling up with water. She's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, what? And you said you know what this is. She goes, you have to boil that water. You can't just use, I was like, well, I use tap water all the time. And she said, you can get like a really bad problem.
Yeah.
And thank God. I mean, I used it for like a couple of months, just filling up with Hicksville tap water.
No, this is no joke. You can literally get a brain-eating amoeba from the water. I guess for whatever reason, if you drink that water, it's not a big deal. But as soon as you put that neti pot into your face and you get it all up in your sinuses, those amoebas can work their way into your brain and you're done. Brain-eating amoebas, which heads up, you don't want.
You know, Nick, is it possible that I could be living with a brain amoeba?
Oh, maybe that's what's wrong with you.
Well, people say, Lynch, what's wrong with you? But I ask Nick, he knows.
Brain, maybe not eating your brain. They're just living in your brain and causing you to be a lunatic. Well, we figured it out. And that's the episode today, folks. Thank you very much for coming. We figured out why Mike is a lunatic. And, we'll see you on the next one.
Brain amoeba.
Yeah, so don't do that. Don't,
oh my God, that's
don't
crazy.
Use the tap water with the neti pot. Not good.
Because my wife can be Mrs. Lynch could be a little bit of a germaphobe. And when she said that, I was like, all right, you're beautiful. I'll listen, but apparently Nick from Nick says brain amoeba.
Other things, just a couple of things that people can do, different dietary changes, things that are high in omega-3 and omega-6 can maybe help them if they're having really bad allergies. The Mediterranean diet can actually help people if they're experiencing big allergy symptoms. And of course, like you said, dairy can be a really big thing and can, make other allergy symptoms worse if you have a slight allergy intolerance and a pollen and you're just stacking all these allergies on top of each other. It's not good.
Yeah, we'll do a separate video on this, Nick, but I think that we'll mention a couple of foods that can be what's called histamine. People that have histamine problems, they can have what's called a histamine intolerance or mast cell activation syndrome. And there's certain foods that are high in histamine or they can be what's called histamine liberators. And another new kid on the block that's the big hero, avocados.
That can be a big problem.
Avocados are very high histamine food. So avocados, bananas, chocolate, these are very high histamine foods. Everybody loves fermented food these days, but very, very high in histamine. So anything like kombucha, yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, these are very high histamine. And there's certain foods that are what's called histamine liberators, like beans and lentils. So there's a long list. Leftovers can grow histamines. Fish that isn't fresh. So these are foods that people are eating on a regular that compound on top of the seasonal allergies and literally can just destroy people.
Mhm.
People walking around stuffed all the time, and they're blaming their cat or their dog, and they have a hypoallergenic dog, and it's not. It's the yogurt that they're eating every morning. So these are things that, it's a lot to think about, but these are things that people are eating on an everyday basis, and they can be driving themselves crazy trying to figure out what they're allergic to on the outside, but it's something that they're eating that's a healthy food,
Well,
but they're
two
high in
two quick things
histamines.
I want to say because I don't want to forget. Some things that people can eat that can help. Onions and apples actually can have a slight effect
Okay.
in a positive direction on that. Turmeric is also something that people can have if they're experiencing, like major problems, and that can kind of help. But when you're talking about pets, a lot of people think long hair dogs are the problem, but it's actually the dander.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter the length of hair that your dog has. It's the saliva, it's the dander, it's all of these different things that people can have, a major reaction to. Luckily, I am not allergic to dogs. I did have a little time where I was allergic to cats, but I think that's gone now. So I'm all in these like weird cycles that come and go for me, but I seem to be okay. But people need to realize that that is a thing.
Yeah, your body chemistry changes every 7 years with allergies. So you can get allergic to anything at any time, because a lot of times people will fight with themselves of, oh, I always ate fill in the blank, or I've always been around dogs,
Yeah.
and your body chemistry changes about, I think it's every 7 years.
Yep.
So
Yep. I hate to say it, but alcohol can be a vasodilator and actually make symptoms worse for some of these things. So people have to be careful if they're drinking. And sugar, white refined sugar as well, can make some of these worse.
yeah,
So these are things that we probably shouldn't be having a lot of anyway. If you're overdoing it with sugar, you've got other problems. So watch out. But the alcohol, unfortunately, the alcohol just keeps, the hits just keep on coming with
I know.
alcohol. I don't think it's as good as we once thought it was, even though we have such a nice display here
We do.
of all of our alcohol.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have to,
My mom's going to call me after she sees this part of the video and say, see, Michael?
just a couple of things, and I know we're getting a little long-winded in this episode, so I want to wrap it up. But things people can do before you go to sleep at night, if you're experiencing these allergies, you can take a shower that helps clean off all the stuff that you've brought in from the outside. Make sure you're washing your sheets in a high temperature. That can even kill the dust mites that are in there. Above 130 degrees is where you want to be for that. You also want to, if you're having a problem with pets, maybe make a no pet zone inside of your bedroom. That can be like a big thing. And get a HEPA filter. We've talked about this before when we were talking about environmental contaminants, but, air filtration can be life-changing in a lot of ways. Get that HEPA filter in your bedroom overnight. Don't open up those windows during high pollen and high allergy times, because you're just bringing all that crap inside. Sometimes maybe use the air conditioner if it's like too hot in there, because the filter in the air conditioner will filter some of that
Sure.
stuff out as well. But don't only rely on that. Make sure you have a good filter. You have a good, a HEPA filter that's cleaning out those allergens and those pollens that are in the air in your room.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, that's all I got for allergies. I think, we kind of talked about a lot of interesting stuff here. People should try, I think the natural remedies for this stuff first and see where that gets them if they're having real problems. This can be really debilitating for some people. If you're not having it, maybe you do know somebody who's having an issue with that. Obviously, don't use tap water in your neti pot. We learned that today, if nothing else, and let's avoid those brain amoebas. But clean the sheets, take your shower, get the HEPA filter, make sure that you're, doing what you can. And, if it's really a problem, try some of those over-the-counter medications and see, what people can get. Anything you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I mean, this is the time of the year that people are most focused on getting in shape, and it comes with the time with everything we're dealing with the outside. So I think, Nick, and don't hold me to this, but I do believe that when you deal with the outside, right, and you have to be outside, or your kids are involved in sports or whatever, you have to go and take care of things on the outside. So if you're not
You can't be a hermit.
no, you can't be a hermit. So I do believe that if you are somebody that unfortunately suffers from season allergies, that you have to even be that much tighter with your diet, because if you're getting allergies from the outside and then you're putting high histamine foods, provided you have problem with these foods, you're just getting a double whammy.
Yep.
So this is, I mean, we want people to eat healthy all year long, but maybe this is even a bigger reason to be more tighter with the diet, so you don't have the allergies coming from leftovers or fermented foods if you have an issue with that. So maybe you take those out and see, and now you're not dealing with two monsters, you're only dealing with one, and maybe it will really cut back and make your symptoms 50% less. A little bit of medication, and you can maybe sail through the spring instead of suffering for a month or two.
Yeah.
So that's my my pearls of wisdom for that.
Okay,
So,
good.
Cut inflammation down, stay hydrated,
Yeah.
and this too shall pass.
Okay. All
So,
right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today for this chat. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know if you have any natural remedies that you've been using for your seasonal allergies, or if you've had great success with an over-the-counter drug. If you know somebody who is experiencing major seasonal allergies, pass this video along to them. Let them know that you liked it if you did, and that it could help them. I appreciate the time you took to spend with us, and have a great day.
thank you, everyone. And I'm going to go research, or maybe you can help me look how I can get rid of this brain amoeba, because I think that one might be beneficial.
But what if your personality changes and then you're like a totally different person? I'm afraid to get rid of the amoeba. What if I only like the amoeba and I don't like the real Mike Lynch? That's a big problem.
I get fired from the LynchFit podcast. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Please hit the like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss any content in the future.